Hi everyone, my name is Melissa Seco and I'm going to be talking about using picture books to spark coding in kindergarten to grade 3, the primary years. So first I'd like to thank my friend Leslie Pike, who helped give feedback on this session and contribute some ideas. You can find us both at our Twitter handles at the bottom there. Let's begin with the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge we are hosted on the lands of the Mississaugas of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat. We also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. My name is Melissa Seco. I'm currently a grade 1-2 educator in the Toronto District School Board. I also occasionally teach additional qualification courses. I'm a digital lead learner, and I'm passionate about the early years, STEAM, and mathematics. I also used to be an instructional leader for mathematics K-8, and then later on, early years K-2. Our learning goals for this session are that you get an understanding of how to use picture books as a baseline or starting point for coding, get familiar with some different types of books that connect to coding, see ways in which picture books can help you connect to the mathematics curriculum expectations, and see different ways to set up coding in your classroom. Now let's take a look at this quote that will help situate our session today. When children code, they need a baseline story to code, as a programmer needs a baseline task to code to create an algorithm. Integrating both children's books and children's own stories becomes a baseline for children to code and enables children to contextualize coding. This session specifically looks at unplugged coding. Coding is referred to as a sequence. Often both numbers and symbols are used that efficiently communicates an instruction or an action. And this is from Taking Shape, a professional resource. Unplugged coding is looking more specifically at learning tasks or activities that introduce coding and programming through engaging games that use cards, crayons, markers, and do not involve technology. Now let's look closely at the curriculum expectations. When we look at the kindergarten program document, we can find that coding can be found in overall expectation 17 when we're looking at location and movement and thinking about positional language. When we look at grade 1 to 3, we can see that the ideas are built on over the years. So in grade 1, students need to look at sequential events that happen in order. Coding skills for grade 2 continue to build on sequential events, and now they are learning concurrent events that happen at the same time. In grade 3, students are continuing again to build on sequential and concurrent events, but now are beginning to learn about repeating events or loops, things that happen over and over. Let's dive deep into different types of books that can connect to coding. Here are 2 books that can be used as examples to share positional language with students. Peg plus Cat, the Penguin Problem is a story about 4 penguins who are going through an obstacle course but finding it challenging. They need to learn the positional language in order to successfully complete the obstacle course. Inside Outside is a wordless book that teaches positional language from a different perspective, the indoors and the outdoors. Books about coding or using coding vocabulary are also a wonderful way to start. Jolly E 1.0 is one of my favorites. This book teaches children about what coding is. This little girl, Charlotte, is learning how to code and codes her doll to say different things. How to Code a Sandcastle and How to Code a Roller Coaster are two books in a series that use more specific coding language to solve a problem, such as if and then statements and a loop. The books on the right are other books in a series that also look very closely at specific coding vocabulary, such as variables, patterns and loops, functions, and if-then statements. Here are 3 books that I like to use when beginning to teach students about coding. Jolly E 1.0 to teach students what coding is. Peg plus Cat, the Penguin Problem, to teach students the positional language they can use when coding or to remind them of these vocabulary words. Unplugged Coding, to remind students that sometimes we do need to be unplugged as well. Books about maps really help students see how coding is connected to mapping. These 2 books are part of a series. Have You Seen My Monster is the first one that is great to start with, as it doesn't have a map or a grid, but rather has images of shapes throughout a circus and uses arrows to show how to get from one place to another. Have You Seen My Dragon now places a map as the image, such as the one in the center, and uses numbers, as you can see in this one, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, and arrows to show how to get from point A to B, for example, or 1 to 2, and so on. Books with a journey are another way to introduce coding to students. How to Catch a Unicorn is a humorous book that students can think about different hiding spots that the unicorn might go to. They can then draw the hiding spots and place them on a grid. Students can then code their way to the different hiding spots. Narratives like Little Red Riding Hood are also great for students to show a retell. They can draw a picture or write a word or sentence to highlight the beginning, middle, and end of a story. They can then, again, code their way to the beginning, middle, and end to show how they can retell the story. Knuffle Bunny is another story about a journey where this little girl, Trixie, loses her Knuffle Bunny when she goes to the laundromat with her dad. They must retrace their steps in order to find her Knuffle Bunny. Again, students can document that on a grid and show how Trixie retraces her steps to find her Knuffle Bunny. Now let's look closely at how these books or other books can connect to the curriculum. First, it's important to set up items for your unplugged coding area. I like to use a little coding kit such as this one that includes the arrows, a stop and a go, and some open-ended materials for students to use. This allows for students to individually code or to code in small groups if they choose to. I also like to have a little anchor chart close by so that students can refer to the vocabulary, such as the image on the right. When we think about positional language in kindergarten, Help Find Frank is a humorous book where students have to solve a problem in the story. They use the clues to help them find Frank, the dog who gets lost. Here's how I've used it in my classroom. I've provided students with a grid on a table using masking tape. Next, I've used a cutlery container with some open-ended materials, arrows, and peg people. The book is open to a specific page in the book for students' reference, and I have a frame with the direction vocabulary for reference. Students then use the arrows to show the different places, the different pathways they are going to in order to help find Frank. Barrier games are another great way to introduce coding to students. Here is a grid that I'm using in my class from Taking Shape, the resource. As you can see, the grid has letters at the bottom and numbers on the side. It also has a left and a right hand for reference. I'm also using the book Peg plus Cat, the Penguin Problem for this activity. One child will take their grid, and there are 4 square tiles, the blue, green, red, and yellow tiles, and they have an image of the penguins. So each tile or color represents one of the 4 penguins in the story. The first child will hide their 4 penguins on the grid without their friends seeing. Usually I have them use a file folder as a barrier. The other student will then ask questions to determine where the penguins might be hidden. So for example, they might ask, is the yellow penguin hidden under A2? And so on. This may be tricky at the beginning, so instead of using the letters and numbers, children can use positional language such as above, below, right, left, and other words to help them try to locate where the penguins might be hidden. If you want to include coding in your block area or construction area, Box of Text or any other book about connected to construction or building are great choices. Here you can see I have a clear grid that you can use, and I've placed limited amounts of blocks. Students can then code their way to the blocks they need to build a structure. If you want to make this more complex, you can place more blocks on the grid, or students can choose to visit a block multiple times. You can also give students a smaller grid to add more items or take away items to make it less complex. When we think about sequential events in grade 1, we can use all the previous experiences, and we can also use this book, for example, Can You Find My Robot's Arm? This story is about a robot who has lost his arm, and him and his friend are trying to locate it. Here is an example of how I've used it in my classroom. I created an anchor chart with the students, and I've taken an images from the story, and we've placed them in order according to the story, so in sequence. Students then decided on 2 or 3, or some students wanted to place all of them, the locations, on their grid. They then retold the story by having the little robot travel through their grid and try to find their arm. Love Z is one of my favorite books. In this story, you can see that I've used 2 hearts to represent what love means to different people. Z is trying to determine what love means. So as he asks different people in the story, students can retell this by using the hearts as those people and coding their way there. I've also have a little tiny bottle to represent a message in a bottle that Beatrice writes at the beginning of the story. You can use any loose part, though, to represent this or any other part of the story. Books like Say Something or All Are Welcome are great stories to introduce coding and sequence when using words. For example, if I want to say the word hello, as on this grid in the image, I can put the square tiles, or these are just Scrabble cubes, or you can use Scrabble tiles, or simply write the letters on your grid. Students can then code their way to spell the word hello in order. So for example, the peg person would go to H, then E, then L, and then O. Students can also write different words such as welcome, or write words in a different language. Again, showing their understanding of coding in sequence. If you'd like to integrate coding into your makerspace or art studio or just an art experience, you can place some plasticine or clay on a grid. I've used the book Claymates for reference. Students can make their own claymate by coding their way to the color of clay they would like to use. If they only want to use one color, they can code their way there. If they want to use multiple colors, then they can code their way to the various colors they want to use. You can extend this to a grade 2 problem by having 2 peg people like I have here and having students concurrently or code at the same time their way to the different pieces of code of clay. Then they can concurrently or collaboratively build a claymate together. So that leads us into grade 2, concurrent events. The Legend of Rock, Paper, Scissors is a student favorite. This activity is a little bit tricky at first, as students have a pair of students will have a grid at the center of them. You will place 3 open-ended materials, one to represent rock, another to represent paper, and a third to represent scissors. Students then can use a paper grid that they have on a clipboard, or I've also had students use a whiteboard and whiteboard markers. Each student has their own. They then look at the grid in the center and code their way without showing their friend on their clipboard to either rock, paper, or scissors. This is a little bit tricky because they have to transfer what's in the center, the grid, to their grid on their clipboard. Once they're complete, they can show their partner so they can reveal the code that they've made and concurrently code their way to rock, paper, scissors. So for example, if I coded my way to paper and Leslie coded her way to scissors, Leslie would win because scissors cuts paper. Big Red Lollipop lends itself to a great story to have students code concurrently. In this story, 2 sisters go to a birthday party together. You can use the open-ended material on this grid to represent the girl's home, different places in the story, the birthday party, and you can have the 2 sisters follow the same code concurrently to get to the birthday party. When we think about grade 3, repeating events, we want to think about events that happen over and over again. The Water Princess is a great book for this. Gigi collects water each day with her family. This is a daily event. If we ask students to show the path that Gigi and her family take over a week, for example, students could show their code and multiply it by 7 to show the loop of 7 days. When's My Birthday is another example of a book you can use. This story is a great one for the beginning of the year if you are creating a birthday wall or discussing different types of celebrations with students, such as a birthday. Students can think about how many days it is to their birthday. They can use a number chart, such as this one, or any number chart, and for example, if their birthday is in 60 days, students can multiply 25 times 2 and add 10 more. So their loop is the 25 2 times. Students can also think about going to the number 10, for example, 6 times. So showing that loop with just one number and coding their way there. So again, showing that multiplicative thinking. Now to end off with this quote, to think about how we have integrated some experiences for coding and play. Coding allows children to play in the same way they play in playgrounds. communicating, debating, arguing, solving problems, moving, making choices, and following rules. Thank you, everyone, and happy coding!